Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, it is Lions season. Adam Schefter has another report out about how many teams are interested in that number 3 overall pick that the Arizona Cardinals are currently holding. We'll talk about that, plus a couple quarterbacks that expect to get their name called early. We'll hear a little update on them. My appearance on Up and Adams, the show with Kay Adams on FanDuel TV, had that on Monday. You'll hear that conversation, plus your calls and texts. We'll close out the show on a very busy Tuesday, April 11th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show the first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it drops. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, we do appreciate you. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for checking us out, whether it's a minute or 31 minutes, whatever the case may be. We appreciate that. And we also appreciate my man Ari on Twitter at Ari Produces. He makes sure we're up on YouTube each and every day, and I can't thank him enough for that. Got a lot to get to on today's show, but before we dive into it, I want to go ahead and address a text that I got on the Locked On Raiders podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. And this is just a happy birthday or happy little birthday shout out. This text says, "Hey Q, it's my brother Patrick and his wife Christina's birthday on April 11th. I just wanted to give them a special shout out. He's actually the one who got me into the podcast. We've both been listening every day for years now. Forever grateful for being brought up a Raider. Thanks to him and all the things he's done for me throughout the years. Keep up the amazing work, Q. Love this time leading up to the draft and all the coverage on it." Again, don't know the name of the texter, but I do appreciate the text. And happy birthday to Patrick and his wife, Christina. Hopefully they're having a fantastic day and enjoying the time. So definitely thank you so much for that. Now let's go ahead and jump into the news and notes. And I mentioned Lion season and Adam Schefter in his latest report he put out on Twitter early on Monday. His tweet said at least 6 teams have inquired with the Cardinals about trading up for the 3rd overall pick in the upcoming April 27th NFL draft per league sources. Cardinals still are mulling whether to move the pick or to make it. That's from Adam Schefter on Twitter on Monday. And look, I think it makes a lot of sense that teams are inquiring about the number 3 overall pick. I know he said the Cardinals are still mulling whether to move the pick or make it. I think that that's the BS part of the tweet. I think that there's no chance that they're going to be picking at number 3. One of these quarterback needy teams, whether that's the Colts, whether that's the Seahawks, whether that's the Raiders, whether that's the Titans. Well, I mean, there's plenty of different teams that could look at that spot and say, yeah, we're interested in that number 3 overall. The Lions, and I know you're probably saying, well, Seattle has a quarterback and so does Detroit. Yeah, but they can have another guy, especially if Anthony Richardson is their guy and he's there at number 3. I can see them making the move to go get that guy and let him sit behind either Geno Smith or Jared Goff and then learn the game a little bit. I can definitely see that. So, I think it's smart business for all these teams to reach out to the Cardinals and say, hey, what is it going to take to get that number 3 spot? Because look, I don't think this trade happens until the actual day of the draft. That's April 27th. And once the Cardinals are on the clock, it's not like they got all day to sit there and think about this decision, that decision, and what this team has, what the Lions have, what the Raiders have, what the Titans have. No, they got to be able to make this decision quick, fast, and in a hurry. If a team is going to make the trade, got to pull the trigger on it pretty quick. 15 minutes will go by quick, fast, and in a hurry. And then all of a sudden you're looking up saying, what happened? So if Dave Ziegler already reached out to the Cardinals, which I'm sure he already has, figured out exactly what it's going to take to move up from 7 to 3. And I do believe if either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud happens to be there at the number 3 spot, I think the Raiders make that move. Like, I feel very confident in saying that. Now, if it's Anthony Richardson, maybe not. Right? Gut feeling tells me they stay there at number 7 and go ahead and pick the best defensive player available. I just don't think that they want to invest a whole lot into a quarterback if it's not one of the 2 dudes, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. And it seems like there's a lot more traction on the possibility that maybe Stroud or Young is there at number 3. And again, it's Lions season. We're 16 days out from the draft, so a lot of things can change quick, fast, in a hurry. But it just feels like there's kind of a little bit of momentum towards possibly one of those dudes being there at number 3. A little side note that I found to be pretty interesting. CJ Stroud's agent is the same agent that Deshaun Watson has. And, of course, if Bryce Young, which a lot of reports have that Bryce Young is going to go number 1 to Carolina, if CJ Stroud falls to number 2, are the Texans and Nick Caserio, are they interested in a quarterback that has the same agent as Deshaun Watson with all the issues that they have with Watson and of course, how that all shook out? Now, it shouldn't matter right? I mean, let's be honest about this. It shouldn't matter who the agent is. If the player is the player, go get him, right? I mean, and we've talked about that with the Raiders, and even when Khalil Mack had his whole scenario, and we're talking about certain agents, players, that shouldn't matter, but sometimes it could. And I don't know Nick Caserio, the GM of the Texans. I know he comes from the Patriots, and maybe he feels some kind of way about Deshaun Watson's agent. I don't know, but it's just a little side note that I found to be interesting. Maybe they would pass on Stroud. Maybe they would grab Richardson instead. Maybe because DeMeco Ryans is a defensive-minded head coach, they take Will Anderson at number 2, right? I mean, and there's a possibility that can happen. He's got a 6-year deal, talking about DeMeco Ryans. So there's a good possibility that they say, you know what, we don't love any of these quarterbacks. I heard that immediately when the draft season started, that they didn't love any of these quarterbacks. So, again, you got to take all the information that we're getting with a grain of salt. It's April, early April, and we're waiting until end of April to find out who's actually going to go to these teams. But there's a possibility that Stroud or Young could be there available at number 3. So I just found that to be interesting. But Adam Schefter's tweet kind of set off a bunch of alarms. I even heard Vinny Bonsignore on the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920 saying he thinks that the Raiders might trade up to number 3 for Will Anderson. And I don't see it. I respect Vinny. We all know that. But I don't see them trading up for a defensive player. I just think that they have too many holes. But Stroud or Young, I absolutely could see that. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update from Matt Miller from ESPN. I was on ESPN on Saturday this Easter weekend on the show called Game Day, and he was a guest. And so I wanted to bring a couple sound bites from that show on a couple quarterbacks. And the first one was Tennessee's Hendon Hooker, who the Raiders will be visiting with sometime this week, and C.J. Stroud as well will be at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. But the first question I have from Matt Miller, and you'll also hear a follow-up, was just about why Hendon Hooker all of a sudden is flying up draft boards.
Well, I think this time of year, it all goes back to the tape. You know, like I know I just referenced the Combine interview with Levis, but as teams start to set their boards, you're putting the whole puzzle together. And 90% of that puzzle is your tape. Hendon Hooker threw 5 interceptions the last 2 years. I mean, he has the best touchdown to interception ratio of any quarterback in this draft. He was successful at Virginia Tech. He was successful at Tennessee. And I think there's also that even the way that Richardson and Levis are, I believe, artificially being put into the top 5. They're not top 5 players in this draft. They'll be selected there because they're quarterbacks. Same thing goes for Hendon Hooker. He's probably not a top 31 player in this class, but is it possible he's selected there? Absolutely, because there are so many teams that do need a quarterback, whether it's the Minnesota Vikings or could it be the Baltimore Ravens? Could we see a Detroit or a Seattle trade back and start to think about the future? I think that's where Hendon fits in. It's not because he's a top 20 or 25 player in this class. It's because the position he plays and how desperate teams are to find that next guy.
Sticking with Hendon Hooker, and I know you mentioned he had success at Virginia Tech, but how concerning is it for teams because he is coming out of that Josh Heupel offense there at Tennessee, which is very similar to, Briles at Baylor when it was basketball on grass?
Yeah, you have to factor it in, and I think that's, what my job is, and the same that area scouts and college scouting directors are doing for NFL teams is you have to pull the traits out of the system. I would say you got to do the same thing for C.J. Stroud at Ohio State. You got to pull the player out of the system and say, okay, what are your individual talents? What are you good at? I see Hendon Hooker as an elite deep ball thrower. He's great at making quick decisions, which that up-tempo spread makes you do. You got to make quick decisions. Sure, he's not making full field reads, but he's doing enough pre-snap to get his guys in the right situation and to determine, hey, where am I going to go? Coverage looks like this. Here's my matchup. Boom, we're going there. So I almost think he's been underrated in terms of his readiness and his NFL traits because the scheme is so good. Joe Burrow had a hell of a scheme and a lot of talent around him at LSU. Joe Burrow is still a great player. He's a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. I'm not saying Hendon's going to be a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, but there are examples and precedents where you got a really good player in a really good scheme with really good talent around him. They can still become very, very good NFL quarterbacks. So there's Matt Miller on Hendon Hooker, and also a follow-up talking about that Josh Heupel offense. I like Hendon Hooker a lot. Liked what he was able to do at Tennessee. The only thing that concerns me is that Josh Heupel offense and knowing that it's just like that Briles offense at Baylor, like basketball on grass. But Matt Miller kind of feels like he's in a good position and maybe he's a little undervalued at this point. So, again, just one person's thoughts on a quarterback. And the final soundbite I want you to hear from Matt Miller is on Anthony Richardson. And it's funny because the co-host that I had on Game Day on Saturday started off the question asking, hey, Matt, is Anthony Richardson going to cost someone their job? Love this answer from Matt Miller on Anthony Richardson. He will cost someone their job, but it might be because they passed on him. So, yes, but this might be like Patrick Mahomes, when he was coming out, there was a lot of, man, if you take this guy, he can cost you your job. And he did. He cost Ryan Pace his job in Chicago because he didn't take Mahomes. He took Mitch Trubisky. So, yes, I do think when Richardson – look, I honestly think, like, Anthony Richardson is one of the most, like, wrongly discussed players in this year's class because, you know, it's all about the mechanics for me. And the fact that he's only started 13 games, he had a scheme change in between his sophomore and junior season, a dramatic scheme change at that. Only started 13 games, threw fewer than 400 passes. We don't know who he is yet as a quarterback. I don't think he even knows who he is as a quarterback yet because we haven't seen a lot of reps. But from an athletic standpoint, he is the most gifted player measured ever at the NFL scouting combine at that position, ever. Better than Cam Newton, better than Dante Culpepper, better than anybody. He's better than them. And so I think it is, to me, it's fair to say, like, okay, well, Josh Allen coming out was this supersized athletic quarterback that needed work. He needed to improve his mechanics. I think it's fair to make that comparison. Now, what people forget about Josh Allen is he is one of the most instinctive, intelligent quarterbacks in the NFL. And so he has worked his tail off to become the Josh Allen we see now. So I think the question is, can Anthony Richardson get to a situation where he has the culture around him to do that? For all of Josh's credit, and he deserves a lot of it, I mean, he's in a great system. Brandon Beane is one of the best general managers in football. You know, you had Brian Dable, you had Ken Dorsey, you got Joe Brady. Like, they've made an effort to surround him with people who understand the quarterback position. So my hope is that Anthony Richardson goes somewhere similarly, that he has those guys in place. You know, if he goes somewhere with a defensive head coach that's like, hey, let's roll with this, you're just going to go be Superman, I don't think that's the best thing for his development.
So there you go right there. Yes, he's going to cost someone his job according to Matt Miller, and that's because they don't select him, right? And he brings up Patrick Mahomes when he wasn't selected by Chicago, and they ended up going with Mitchell Trubisky, and it cost the Bears GM his job because, well, he made such a bad decision. I don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to be the Patrick Mahomes, but you know the thing about Anthony Richardson I've been thinking of, everyone's talking about how dynamic he is and how he could be the next best thing. He might not have to be the next best thing. He could just be really good, right? He doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. Like, we look at Patrick Mahomes like, man, you got to get that guy. Well, maybe not. Maybe you don't have to get that guy. Maybe you just have to get a guy that's really good and a guy that can help be a difference maker on your team, right? Just another offensive weapon. And, of course, you need a guy that can complete 3rd and 8. You got to have a guy that can complete the passes when you need them, but he doesn't have to be Superman. So it's just some things that go through my mind. As you know, I got that little Anthony Richardson on my shoulder still yelling at me, Q, I should be the pick. Q, Raiders should go get me. He's still right there, right? And I got 16 days to make a decision. My smart brain tells me, go with the defensive player because the Raiders need so much defense. But, that guy on my shoulder, man, he's like a Lamborghini, right? It's like, I know the car with the greatest value. I should go and make that selection. But, man, that Lambo on my shoulder is hard to resist. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, I made an appearance on Up and Adams, the show with Kay Adams on FanDuel TV on Monday. It's my second time being on the show. I thought the thing went really good. It was a really good conversation about all things Raiders and the draft, and you'll hear that conversation coming up next after I tell you about the Ultimate Football GM. And basically, that's what we've been doing every single day since the offseason started here on the podcast. We've been playing the Ultimate Football GM. Well, this time, you can actually play it in game form. You get to pick your coaches. You pick your draft players. You sign your free agents. You go through the ups and downs of a regular season. Try to get your team into the playoffs. Try to make your run to the Super Bowl. It's all on you. You are Dave Ziegler, and this is the Ultimate Football GM. It's very challenging. It's realistic. It's completely free. It is playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And all listeners of the Locked On Raiders podcast will get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. It's all caps. It's in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Wanted to bring you the appearance I made on Up and Adams, Kay Adams' show. You know, she used to be on Good Morning Football on NFL Network. She does a fantastic job. I've been on her show before. I also ran into her at the Super Bowl in Phoenix, and she had me on her show again on Monday, talking all things draft. It was funny. I was actually on with Sheena Quick, who covers the Carolina Panthers. Of course, they've got the number 1 spot. Stacey Joe Ross was on the show as well, and she covers the Seattle Seahawks. They have the number 5 spot. Then it was me, and then Pro Football Focus's Mike Renner. So it's so funny. All guests that I normally have either here on the podcast or I have on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920. We're also on Kay Adams' show. So, yeah, good company to keep. It was a really good show, a really fun show, just breaking down all things NFL draft. And, of course, Kay Adams is fantastic at doing what she does. So hopefully you were able to catch the TV show on FanDuel TV if you have that. If not, here's the conversation I thought was really good with Kay Adams on Up and Adams on FanDuel TV on Monday.
Let's bring in the host of Locked On Raiders and on-air personality for LB Sports Network as well. He covers everything Raiders and Vegas. Your boy, Q. Hello.
Hey, what's happening? How you doing? Happy belated birthday. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Still recovering from that. Now, listen, Are y'all jumping up and taking a quarterback? What's going on?
Well, I'll tell you, it depends. It depends on who's actually there at number 3. And this is a discussion we've had quite a bit. And it's really coming down to, from everything I've heard, if C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young happens to be there at number 3, which I don't think is going to happen, if one of those 2 guys is available at number 3, I think there's a real possibility that the Raiders go make a move for him. Outside of him or Stroud and Young, I don't think that they will, because there's so many other holes that they have to fill, mainly on the defensive side of things.
Okay, but when you bring in Jimmy G, you're bringing in inherent injury risk. It's
right.
Just true. You look at the games played, you need to have a better backup plan, especially with Devontae Adams and a good defense in a competitive division. You know these things. So they did, tell me if I'm wrong, Will Levis was in the building.
Yep.
And then Anthony Richardson, just there over the weekend. The reviews I'm hearing very positive for Richardson. If they were to trade up, who would you like them to get?
That's a great question. We've gone back and forth so many times, and it's so funny because my brain, my smart football brain that I like to think that I have, tells me build up the defense, build up the defense, build up the defense. Yes, Jimmy G is an injury risk, but at the same time, Anthony Richardson's on my shoulder saying, Q, I am the best dynamic quarterback in this draft. Draft me, draft me, draft me. So I'm very torn on the situation, but I do think that the defense is so needed. I really do. And I think that there's an opportunity for the Raiders to really turn this thing around. They have 12 draft picks going into this draft. So I think Dave Ziegler, the GM, has a lot of opportunity to really get this thing turned around and give Max Crosby some help. And look, if one of those quarterbacks falls like Stroud or Young, go get them by all means. If not, then they'll have some decisions to make. But my gut feeling tells me that they're going to go with defense at number 7.
And what kind of defense? I mean, that cornerback, Witherspoon?
Man, I like Witherspoon a lot. I always say, Kay, the DBs win games. I like Witherspoon. I like Gonzalez, but they need line help too. They need an interior guy to fit the tackle. They need edge rusher. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about where the Raiders are sitting, and I guess having as many holes as they have, they really can't go in a bad direction, right? If they trade up to go get the quarterback of the future that they really believe in, great. If they start building up that defense, even better, right? So I think that Witherspoon would be the pick if, a Tyree Wilson is already gone. I don't think that Jalen Carter is a guy that they're looking at just for multiple reasons. But they could. I mean, there's so many different directions that they go. If it was me right now, I'd probably pencil in Witherspoon. I just think he's what Patrick Graham wants to do defensively. That would be the guy that I penciled in at number 7. They also could trade back a few picks and still get a really good player on defense because this draft is really loaded with defensive players.
And get more picks.
Right.
I mean, Baltimore's looking at them with their 5 measly picks, saying you have how many, and you might even trade back.
Right.
But everyone's saying it's not that you don't want to be being in the first round isn't cool. Right. You don't want to be the first person to show up to the party. You don't want to be in the first round. Move to the second round, move to the third round. That's where it's at least for this season. That's Devin Witherspoon. You're talking about the Illinois product. We'll ask Mike Renner of PFF about him. And Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon will ask him as he is sizing up numbers-wise and looking at what they can do and how they can impact these different teams. Are you a Jimmy G guy? I can't tell because you got Anthony Richardson's on your shoulders telling you to draft him. And we're talking like move back in the draft. So you're a bona fide Jimmy G believer?
No. I believe that he's going to get injured, right? And that's been my biggest fear. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good quarterback. He knows Josh McDaniels really well. He knows what Josh McDaniels is going to want to do. Every player that's come in that they signed in free agency, all have said how much they're excited to play with Jimmy G. But, Kay, I mean, my biggest fear is that he's going to get injured because that's what we see we see him get injured, so I don't want to close my eyes and act like it doesn't happen, right? That'd be foolish. So I believe that he's a guy that's injury prone. They just signed Brian Hoyer. He's a backup. Okay, that's great. But at some point, you do have to get your quarterback of the future. Is it now or is it later?
Yes, now or later is a good question. As for now and later, this offseason, I'm going to have to put those, ridiculous rankings together for how I feel like the division's going to shake out. Where am I putting the Raiders?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I mean, you've got to – Sean Payton's now with Denver. I think they're still a little ways away. I honestly believe if the Raiders could put things together, I think that they can compete with the Chargers. I think they can. The Chiefs are obviously the best team in the division. There's no doubt about it. But I think that the Raiders will give the Chargers a run for their money. They compete with them each and every year, really tough, even when the team doesn't have as much talent. So I think that it should be fair to rank them with the Chargers kind of neck and neck, and the Broncos still behind. But they're about a year away. I think that Sean Payton's going to get that Bronco team turned around.
It's funny you bring up Sean Payton, who's got a lot of adversity. Like, what is wrong with Russell Wilson? He's got to start there. He's got to start with, does he get along with Russell Wilson?
Right.
He's a brash guy. Mm-hmm. He's a real, Russell is not that. How is that going to work? The Hackett experience didn't work really well. So when you're talking about where to put these Raiders, I look right at Josh McDaniels because to me, and you brought up the coach for the Broncos, your coach is paramount in this. I don't think people are giving enough credit to how important it is and how he's a hard ass.
Right.
Josh McDaniels. He likes what he likes. He wants it how he wants it. He got what he wanted. Jimmy G is his boy. He knows Jimmy G. He knows how he operates. He knows that just that alone, just that they get along. And that should be gravy for this season. I think people aren't talking about enough.
I agree with you, and getting to know Josh over the past year. I mean, he is a guy that, like you mentioned, is a hard ass. He's a guy who wants it his way as far as coaching. I think he's a really great guy in the hallways as far as personality. But when it comes to coaching, and you'll hear him out there at training camp, he'll be barking at the players. I mean, he wants it his way. And so I think the players that matter, the Max Crosbys, the Devontae Adams, the alpha dogs on the teams, that the fact that they appreciate him and embrace him, I think that goes a long way. And then, of course, they brought in a lot of players over the course of the offseason that have Patriot ties, like a Jacoby Myers, Jimmy G, like you mentioned. They know what's expected, and they chose to come play for Josh McDaniels. So I think that goes a long way as well. I'm just excited to see how they put this all together. They have their guys in place, Kay. It's no longer, well, this is the team you inherited. Now it's, okay, these are your guys, and the draft picks are going to be your guys. So now you are really going to be tasked with having to turn this team around, because 6 wins is not going to cut it.
Jimmy G to Devontae Adams will be a thing of beauty. All the headlines this morning about Lamar to Odell, but I can't wait to see what that looks like with that creativity out of that coach that wears a visor, who is a hard ass. We appreciate you, your boy Q, covering everything for the Raiders and Las Vegas sports for LV Network.
So there was the conversation right there. If you wanted to check it out, I believe it's on YouTube. You can check it out, just Up and Adams, and you'll see it. The whole show, I know for a fact, is up there. I don't know if they broke it up individual interview by individual interview, but I know for a fact that it is up there on YouTube, and I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. Again, Kay Adams does a fantastic job. She is very good at her job, and I do appreciate her having me on. So that was that conversation with Kay from Monday on Up and Adams. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, speaking of FanDuel TV, it's time to tell you about FanDuel. And right now, when it comes to baseball, grand slams, no hitters, double plays, they're all happening right now. There's no better place to get in on the Major League Baseball action than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. And I mean, everything is going on right now. Of course, baseball players are still getting used to these new rules, but there's still a lot of fantastic action. I'm a big baseball fan. I'll tell you what, though, the Oakland A's, they ain't worth the salt. I know that's my team, but they ain't worth the salt, man. I think they've given up like 5,000 runs already early in this young season. But don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet. Don't act like the Oakland A's and strike out, right? Get up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your time to shine. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. And you can tweet at me At your boy Q254, you want to send me a message and get on the show, I'll do my best as well. Got a lot of messages coming through, texts, calls, tweets, everything. Try to get as much on as possible. Please don't get upset if your call or text doesn't get on. I'm trying my very best to get as many on and also kind of rotate as many people on as possible. So this tweet comes from Marcus at MarcusPatrickW1. Pretty lengthy one. It says, Q, Red Bear Raider from Alameda, California. We need to trade back in first round and grab extra pick, take cornerback Porter, Gonzalez, or Witherspoon with that first pick. We then need linebacker Jack Campbell and defensive tackle Kay Benton or Mozzie Smith. And at defensive end, I like Oregon kid DJ Johnson in the third. We then have 4 players who can start contributing immediately in rotations on D. We need to get quicker, specifically at linebacker, so I'd like to see us take a couple of linebackers after Campbell that can run sideline to sideline. I'm confident in Ziegler's ability to get another starting guard in the 4th or 5th. Excited to see what we do in the draft. Big draft in our history. The team is set up to play now. Yes, there are holes, but we could play Sunday if needed. That was an Al Davis quote that he used to say in the offseason. Moves haven't been splashy, but clear plan going forward for players in late 20s who have had previous production. Hooper, Spillane, David Long, Howard, etc. The most important pick, though, is a defensive tackle. Let's give Max a player inside who can push the pocket and not allow a quarterback to step up. If we do, that Max can feast. He has spoke of wanting to break Raiders' sack record. Can we give our most consistent player that supporting cast? Go Raiders. That is from Red Bear Raider, a.k.a. Marcus at MarcusPatrickW1. Very lengthy tweet right there, but thank you so much for that, my man. And I have no problem with defense, and more defense. Every area that you talked about needed to be addressed, you're spot on, right? Linebacker needs to be addressed. Defensive tackle needs to be addressed. Defensive end needs to be addressed. Corner, everything needs to be addressed. So, I mean, there's not really a wrong area you can go. Dave Ziegler just got to get the right players. I think cornerback is a must, right? If you're going to get them, and if you're going to get Gonzalez or Witherspoon, you probably have to get them maybe number 10 at the latest, 10 or 11. I don't think you could trade back too far, like 14 or 15, and get one of those guys. Maybe Porter's available at 14 or 15. I think Witherspoon and Gonzalez go off the board really, really early. As far as defensive tackles, it's a pretty deep one. I just got a hold of Dane Brugler from The Athletic, the Beast. The Beast is out right now, and I'm trying to tell you, you want to really deep dive on some of these draft prospects. Think about this. Dane Brugler does this every year, and it's like 5 years running on The Athletic. 308 pages, 401 scouting reports, 1,893 player rankings, and hundreds of schools represented in this draft guide. He's going to be a guest on my radio show probably next week, so I'll bring some of the great highlights to the show here as well, the podcast. But, man, that's a very good guide right there. If you want to deep dive on not just the round 1 guys, not just round 2 guys, but round 3, round 4, round 5, guys that are going to go in the 7th round, guys that are going to go undrafted, that's what you have to have. Dane Brugler's The Beast, and you can get it with the Athletic subscription. I'm not telling you got to go get an Athletic subscription, but I'll tell you what, it's one of the great perks of having the Athletic subscription is being able to get your hands on The Beast, and I just downloaded mine on Monday night. I'm already doing a little bit of deep diving, so can't wait to get Dane on the show. But thank you so much for that tweet, my man. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a call from Tyler in Missouri. He's calling as a new booty to talk about who he likes the Raiders to have in the draft, and it's a guy I've talked about quite a bit. Here he is, Tyler in Missouri.
Hey, Q. It's your boy, Tyler. This is like the first time I think I've ever called somebody about the Raiders because I live in Missouri, so yeah. I really like Devin Witherspoon for the Raiders. I think he could be the next Charles Woodson, which there's no next Charles Woodson, but he reminds me a lot about him. The physicality, the tackling, there's just everything. And I feel like he could be a really good player in this defense. And I know you feel like he could do that too. But I'm just hoping we don't crap ourselves in this draft. I really do. I don't feel like watching the draft and just seeing the Raiders go full on offense because we've had too many drafts in the last couple of years that have been pointless. We need to get younger. We need to get stronger. We need to get faster. We need to get tougher. We need more dogs, as you say on your podcast. We need more dogs. Look at the Lions. They could take their division because they got dogged on offense, defense, and special teams. All 3 phases. We need to get better. And we've gotten better through free agency, but that's not how you build a team. You need to get better at all 3 phases. Free agency, draft. That's how you get better. So I just wanted to tell you that and stuff, and yeah. Peace out, Raider Nation.
Tyler, thanks for the call. Appreciate you, my man. Don't let that be the last call. And yeah, Witherspoon, I think he'd be a great pick for the Raiders secondary. Dogs, and more dogs is needed, right? I mean, I'm not the only one who said it, as a matter of fact. I'm not the only one who said that they need more dogs. Max Crosby, at the very end of the season, when the Raiders were cleaning out their locker room, he was one of the last guys in the locker room. He talked to us about 10 or 15 minutes, and I had asked him a question about recruiting players, and he brings up needing dogs. And I mean, it's just that simple. He brings it up, and that he's working and trying to get in Dave Ziegler in everyone's ear. Not that it matters what he says, but he said he's going to be in their ears trying to get players to the organization. Check out what Max had to say at the end of the season.
When Chandler Jones came, he said he wanted to play with you. How good of a recruiter are you becoming?
That's something I want to do as well. Help bring in the best guys. I want guys who are like-minded, guys that are relentless and love this game. And with the coaching staff, they know I'm gonna be in their ear. Especially about certain guys that I want. And that's not my responsibility, but I'm always share my 2 cents. And I just want to win. I want to have guys out there who are dogs and not scared to go be great and go make plays. And we just got to have, more guys like that. And, I feel like, we're off to a good start. We have Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams on this team. Dudes are savages. And we get more guys who are like-minded and dogs. We're going to be good.
So there you go. Again, Tyler, thanks so much for the call. And hopefully you enjoyed that Max sound as well, because, again, he just kind of reiterates the point. Dogs are needed. And that's the thing about it. I did a couple of these mock draft simulators. I did the Pro Football Network one on Monday before I went on my radio show. And I traded back so many times, which I thought I was doing some great things to get some extra draft capital for 2024. But then I realized I kind of traded back out of some dogs. I still got some really good players, but I didn't get dogs. I got one, right? Or no, I think I got like 2 dogs. But outside of that, I could have got a few more. I just got a little greedy and I traded back out of it. So that's what the Raiders can't do, is trade out of getting a dominant player and just ended up settling for a good player just for the sake of getting more draft capital. That's what I think that they can't do. But thank you, Tyler, for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Nick in the OC. Says, hey, Q. Nick from the OC here. I believe similar to you and the Most Raider Nation calling in is we need to build our defense and we need some alpha dogs. I'm with you. If we can't get the top 3 quarterbacks with our number 7 pick, then go with the best defensive player possible. Please avoid Will Levis. I'm not sold on this guy, and as usual, the media always overhypes a quarterback based on old performance, not current performance. Big red flag. Now, I don't have too much confidence in Ziegler and McDaniels drafting quarterbacks because my heart tells me they're riding Brady's coattails. It's not like any of the other quarterbacks from New England could win a Super Bowl. But I do have a lot of confidence in Ziegler and McDaniels building a top 10 defense. I wholeheartedly believe we'll get fortified studs on the defensive side through the draft. Perhaps in the later rounds, we should draft a quality backup quarterback who has potential of becoming a quarterback 1, such as DTR or someone similar. That's Nick in the OC. Thanks for the text, my man. I do appreciate you. And, I can't really judge the quarterbacks that were drafted in New England off of Ziegler and McDaniels because we know they weren't calling the shots. Ziegler was on the staff. He was in the front office, but he wasn't the guy pulling the trigger. And from everything I've read, he kind of has a different philosophy than a lot of the folks in New England. So I'm willing to give him an opportunity. I'm willing to give him the chance to go and draft a quarterback and see if he could be the quarterback of the future. Everything I hear that they're looking at Stroud and Bryce Young, those are the 2 quarterbacks that they'd won early. I believe those 2 dudes are game changers, right? I think that they're really good quarterbacks and they could help the Raiders long term. I think C.J. Stroud is no doubt a franchise quarterback. I think Bryce Young is no doubt a franchise quarterback. So if they went and got one of those 2 dudes, I wouldn't have any problem with that. Levis, I'm not high on him. I never have been, even though some people have called me crazy for it. And Anthony Richardson, we all know I'm on the fence, right? I'm on the fence. I don't know which way to go yet. I'm still that guy. I'm still undecided, even though he is, he looks like he could be a really, really talented player. But thank you, Nick, for that text. I do appreciate you. Let's see. Let's get one more tweet in. I think I can get time for one more text as well. A tweet from Arsenal Raider. Hey, Q. It's your mate from the UK, Arsenal Raider here. Really enjoyed today's show. I especially enjoyed a bit spell on Emmanuel Forbes. Sound like a player in Lucky's highlights. He looks good, really good. Just wanted to comment on S. Raiders voicemail. I like a point that he brought to light. It's an interesting observation about the Niners quarterback. Is there any chance of Paul Gutierrez getting on the show to explain the thinking behind why the offense leaves quarterbacks exposed and how we can cover it in the coming season? Thanks, Q. Love the show. If you get a chance to see Jermaine Illuminor, tell him that after Liverpool match, the N5 have a belief that the Gooners can do it this year. That's from Arsenal Raider. I don't even know what half of that means, but it's all good. Right? It is all good. Definitely appreciate that tweet, man. Good stuff. And yeah, I will ask Paul Gutierrez. I'm very interested in why the San Francisco quarterbacks get injured all the time. And like I said, he did make that comment to me following that 49er game at Allegiant Stadium. So I'll have to ask him about it next time I have him on the show, and I'll bring it to the table. Thank you so much for that. We'll close out with one more text. A text from Stabler's Ghost. He says, "What's up, Q? Stabler's Ghost from the 413. I believe Anthony Richardson holds the key to the draft. If someone gets enamored with him at 1 or 2, either Young or Stroud will be there at 3. McZiegler said that the only way that they move up, McZiegler said that's the only way they move up. I'd rather get rid of players and less draft capital if that's the case. That being said, I hope they draft all defense except for a day 3 quarterback with upside who could sit for at least a season. I like the way they draft, and I think that this has potential to be one of those franchise-changing drafts. Would love to hear your thoughts. Let's go Raiders from Stabler's Ghost." And yeah, I think that if it's Stroud or Young happen to be there at 3, that'd be great. And if a team like Carolina or anyone else gets enamored with Anthony Richardson, then yeah, maybe they pull the trigger and it makes a quarterback that the Raiders are interested in drop to 3, and then I think the Raiders pull that trigger. Defense. I'm with that. Been talking about that for quite a while. They could get a day 3 quarterback. They could get a DTR. They could go get a Tanner McKee. They could go get a Jake Hayner. They could go get multiple guys, right? Hendon Hooker, I believe, will be gone round 1, maybe round 2. I'm trying to think who else is available that they can go get. I mean, they can even go get a Stetson Bennett if they want. I don't know when he's going to get selected. Most people have him around round 7, but there's plenty of folks out there as far as quarterbacks go that they can get on day 3 and just grab them and see what happens, right? See if they can develop into something. If not, then maybe they're a glorified backup. But there you go. So Stabler's Ghost, thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. So that's all I got for you on today's show. Definitely appreciate everyone who chimes in on the daily, on the calls, texts, tweets, whatever the case may be. We'll get more of them coming up on tomorrow's show. Got a call from the 732. I don't know the name, but we'll get that call on tomorrow. Plus, we'll get a lot more. We'll have more news and notes of the day. And, of course, we'll have plenty of conversation here as well as we keep counting down in the days to the NFL draft. April 27th is round 1 in Kansas City, Missouri. And, of course, I'll be there and bring you all the sights and all the sounds. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.